Chapter 1. A Quiet Shift. It had been a slow evening at the county's emergency communications center. The room hummed with the soft whirl of computer fans and the occasional crackle of the radio. Banks of monitors glowed in the dim light, casting a bluish tint across the faces of the dispatchers. Beyond the thick glass of the call floor, the city stretched out in clusters of amber streetlights and dark patches of wooded land. Rain had fallen steadily for days, leaving the air thick with humidity and the road slick. Sarah Wilson stared at the green waveform bobbing across her screen. She was a seasoned dispatcher, her voice a calm and measured lifeline for countless people in panic. She had been trained to greet each caller with the same composure and to ask questions that would pinpoint the emergency. According to public safety guidelines, when a call came in, she was to confirm the location, determine the nature of the incident, and gather details about those involved. In Nashville, for example, dispatchers are trained to ask where the emergency is, the caller's callback number, the patient's problem, age, consciousness, and breathing status. Those same practices shaped Sarah's nightly routine. 911. What's the address of your emergency? She recited whenever a call connected. The script was ingrained now, a mantra to center both herself and the caller. The ability to remain steady had been emphasized since her first day of training. She knew that on the other end of the line, someone could be in the throes of a heart attack, trapped in a burning building, or lost in the woods. The only constant was her voice. The clock on the wall read 11:37 p.m. Most of the town had settled in for the night. A row of dispatchers chatted quietly, sipping coffee and waiting for the next ring. Sarah rubbed her temple. She hoped the rain would keep the roads empty and the phones silent. It was on nights like this, when the monotony threatened to lull her into complacency, that the strangest calls seemed to find their way in. Her headset beeped. A line lit up. Sarah straightened, took a breath, and answered. 911. What's the address of your emergency? The voice that came through was faint, almost drowned by static. Hello. Can you hear me? Please. I need help. Sarah leaned closer. Yes, ma'am. I can hear you. What's the address? What's happening? She clicked her keyboard and began recording. The caller's breaths were shaky, the whisper urgent. The rain outside intensified, drumming on the roof. It's the old farmhouse off County Road 52, the voice said. Please, he's here. The old farmhouse. Sarah paused. County Road 52 cut through a wooded stretch on the outskirts of town, lined with a handful of residences and one derelict structure locals called the Miller Place. It had burned nearly 30 years ago. No one had lived there since. Teenagers used it for dares and ghost stories. There was no operational address there. Sarah's heart rate ticked up. Ma'am, can you verify the address? The old Miller farmhouse on County Road 52 burned down years ago, she said, her tone neutral. She motioned to her supervisor, who looked up from his screen. The caller whispered again. I don't know. I'm hiding under the kitchen table. He's knocking on the door. Please send the police. Sarah typed quickly, opening a new incident card. Stay on the line with me, okay? I'm going to send help. Can you tell me your name? She gestured for another dispatcher to check property records. Sarah had been taught never to hang up until the situation was resolved or responders arrived. She intended to stay with this caller, phantom or not, until she understood what was happening. Emily, came the whisper. My name is Emily. Emily? Are you alone in the house? No. My brother is upstairs. He said he saw someone in the barn. He went to look. I heard screaming, then silence. Now he's knocking." Her voice trembled. "Don't let him in." Sarah's supervisor leaned over her shoulder. "No address on file," he murmured. "That place has been condemned since 1995. Sarah swallowed. She knew about false calls and misdials. She had coached children on prank calls to hang up politely and had warned them that calling 911 for fun was unlawful. But Emily's fear was palpable. She checked the ALI, Automatic Location Identifier, readout. No location information. It was as if the call came from nowhere. She motioned for the sergeant assigned to the overnight shift. "We have a possible call at the Miller place," she said quietly, covering her mic. "We need units." "Who's calling?" Officer Mark Taylor asked, pulling on his jacket. Tall, in his mid-30s, Mark had worked the road for a decade. He knew the county roads by memory. "A young woman named Emily. Said she and her brother are in the farmhouse. She's whispering. No ALI. Might be a prank, but you're not risking it," he finished. He glanced at his partner, Officer Linda Chen, petite but formidable. "Let's go check it out. I've heard stories about that place." Linda rolled her eyes. "Ghost stories? Seriously, Mark?" Mark shrugged. "It keeps the new hires entertained." He nodded to Sarah. "Keep her talking if you can. If it is real, we don't want to lose them." Sarah turned back to her headset. "Emily, officers are on the way. I need you to stay as quiet as possible. Can you tell me what he looks like?" Silence, then a whisper that was little more than breath. He doesn't have a face." Chapter 2. The Drive. Mark and Linda climbed into their cruiser, wipers slashing at the rain. The radio crackled to life. Sarah's voice came through, relaying the information. "Unit 21, be advised. Caller states there's a male subject at the old Miller farmhouse. Possibly 2 victims inside. She's hiding under the kitchen table. Subject described as male. No facial features. Possible unknown mental. No further description." "Copy," Mark responded. He flipped on the lights and sirens. The blue strobe bounced off wet pavement. He knew the route intimately. Down Main Street, past the shuttered gas station, left on County Road 52. The trip would take 10 minutes without traffic. With the rain, maybe 15. Linda scrolled through the car's mobile data terminal. "No dispatch info for that address. The property is owned by the county. It's a ruin. We shouldn't even be going. If this is a prank." "We go because we have to," Mark said. "You know that. Dispatchers are trained to gather as much information as possible, and call takers stay on the line until we get there. We can't ignore it." He didn't mention the other reason he wanted to respond. 5 years earlier, he had been on duty when a call came in about a car sinking in the river. The caller gasped that he couldn't swim, and then the line went dead. By the time they found the car, the driver had drowned. Mark that never forgot the sense of helplessness as he listened to a man die over the phone. Every call now was a chance to prevent another tragedy. "Fine," Linda said, glancing out at the rain. "But if some teen pops out yelling, 'Boo! I'm writing them a ticket!'" They drove in silence. Rain hammered the roof. Lightning flashed occasionally, illuminating the skeletal trees along the roadside. County Road 52 twisted and narrowed as it left the town. Patches of fog hovered over low depressions, swallowing the pavement ahead. The cruiser's engine rumbled steadily. "You ever been to the Miller place?" Linda asked, more to fill the silence than out of curiosity. "Once, years ago when I first joined," Mark said. "An alarm triggered there. We found nothing. Place is just charred beams and a stone chimney. Kids go there to drink. They say a family burned inside." "Urban legend," Linda scoffed. "Every town has one. They say the ghosts call 911 every year on the anniversary of the fire." Mark glanced at her. "Do they now?" Linda smirked. "That's what old man Jenkins told me when he stopped by the station to drop off cookies. He said his father was a volunteer firefighter who responded the night of the fire. They heard a girl's voice on the radio screaming for help. When they got there, the house was already collapsing. They never found the girl's body." People like stories. Linda nodded, but her bravado dimmed. The rain made it hard to see far ahead. The road, flanked by towering pines and thick underbrush, felt isolated. As the cruiser crested a hill, the headlights washed over a rusted mailbox lying on its side. Beyond it, a narrow gravel drive vanished into darkness. "That's it," Mark said, slowing. "The driveway to the farmhouse." He turned, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The car bounced over potholes. Branches scraped the windows. After about 100 yards, the trees opened into a clearing. The headlights fell upon the remnants of a house, the blackened outline of a foundation, a solitary brick chimney standing like a monument. Tall grass swayed around it. The rain had softened the ground to mud. Mark and Linda killed the sirens and stepped out, flashlights in hand. The rain soaked them instantly. The beam of Mark's light pierced the dark, illuminating the chimney, the sagging remains of a porch, and the yawning entrance to a cellar. A rusted swing hung from a lone oak tree, swaying gently despite the lack of wind. "No house," Linda muttered. "No power. No people." Their radios crackled. Sarah's voice. "Unit 21. Caller says the knocking stopped. She doesn't hear her brother anymore. She says the man is inside now." Mark scanned the clearing. There was nowhere a person could be inside. "Sarah, we're at the site. It's a ruin. There's no structure to go inside." Static. Then Emily's voice, faint but clearer. "He's coming down the stairs. Please." Linda exchanged a look with Mark. "Sarah, patch us through to the caller." "You're live," Sarah said. "Emily, this is Officer Mark Taylor with the county sheriff's office," he said, speaking into his radio. "We're here. Can you see us?" Rain and static. "You're not here. Where are you?" "He's coming." Linda felt the hairs on her arms rise. She shone her light into the open cellar. The beam revealed charred steps descending into darkness. Cold air wafted up. "Mark, there's a cellar. I'm going down." "Wait," Mark began, but Linda was already at the opening. She drew her handgun, flicked her flashlight to her left hand, and began to descend slowly. The wooden steps creaked, but held. Mark followed, his radio crackling. The cellar smelled of damp earth and smoke. Their lights revealed stone walls lined with shelves of broken jars. Water dripped steadily from above. At the far end, a doorway opened into another room. A faint blue glow emanated from within. "What the?" Linda whispered. She edged toward the glow. Mark stayed close. They stepped through the doorway. The room beyond was impossibly intact. Despite the ruined state above, this basement room looked as though time had frozen. Wooden beams were clean and uncharred. A table stood in the center, overlaid with a lace tablecloth. An old telephone hung on the wall, its rotary dial gleaming. A staircase led up into darkness. On the far wall, A window looked out onto what seemed like a moonlit yard, though the foundation above had no such window. "This wasn't on the plans," Mark muttered. He had studied the blueprints once out of curiosity. There was no finished basement. Yet here, they stood in a preserved slice of the past. The telephone rang. Chapter 3. The Call Within. The shrill jingle echoed in the small room, incongruous with the storm above. Mark and Linda froze. The telephone was an old black model with a coiled cord and a rotary dial, like something from the mid-20th century. It rang again. Mark looked at Linda. "Do we answer it?" Linda stared at the phone. She swallowed, then reached out with her flashlight hand and lifted the receiver. The ringing stopped abruptly. She held the handset to her ear. "Hello?" she said. Mark strained to hear. Static crackled from the earpiece. Then, faintly, he heard Sarah's voice repeating, "911, what's the address of your emergency?" Linda's eyes widened. A child's voice answered from the other end, the same voice they had heard over the radio. "It's the old farmhouse," the child whimpered. "There's a fire. Mommy and Daddy are upstairs. I smell smoke." Mark's breath caught. Linda's knuckles whitened around the receiver. Sarah's voice came through again. "Okay, sweetie, I'm here to help you. What's your name?" The child sniffled. "Emily." Mark closed his eyes. He realized what they were hearing. This was the original call. The call that had been made the night of the fire. It was trapped, looping, echoing across time. Emily's voice was not a prank. It was a recording of a tragedy playing back, like a record stuck in a groove. But then something shifted. The call diverged. A deep, rhythmic knocking reverberated through the basement room, though nothing physically knocked. The air grew colder. Mark saw his breath in the beam of his flashlight. Linda's eyes darted around. "Emily, is someone there with you?" Sarah's voice asked on the line. "He's knocking," Emily whispered. "He's knocking on the door." Mark felt a pressure on his chest, as if the air had thickened. The tablecloth rustled. Shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch and twist. A tall silhouette materialized near the staircase, dark and shapeless, as though it had been cut from the fabric of night itself. It had no face. Where facial features should have been was smooth, featureless skin, like wax. Its head tilted slightly, listening. "Mark!" Linda whispered, voice trembling. She still held the phone to her ear. The figure raised an arm, long and thin, and began to trace patterns in the air. Mark's flashlight flickered. "He sees us," Linda breathed. Mark drew his firearm. "Sir, this is the police! Show your hands!" His voice echoed off the stone walls. The figure did not respond. Instead, it seemed to glide forward soundlessly. Sarah's voice came faintly through the phone. "Emily, the officers are there. Do you see them?" "No, they're not here," Emily whispered. "He's here." The figure moved closer. Mark aimed, but the thought of firing at something intangible seemed pointless. It stopped a few feet away. Mark felt a coldness seep through his uniform, his mind filled with images not his own. Flames licking at walls, a mother's screams, a child curled beneath a table, hands over her ears. He heard an old man's voice praying and another child crying. He realized he was hearing the memories held within these walls. "We need to leave," Linda said through clenched teeth. Her hand shook. The phone buzzed with static. Emily's voice repeated the same plea. "Don't let him in." Over and over, like a stuck record. The figure reached out a hand toward the handset. Linda instinctively pulled it back. The shadow paused. then placed its hand gently on the rotary dial. It began to spin the dial slowly, deliberately. Each number clicked as it returned. 9. 1. 1. Mark and Linda watched, mesmerized. The phone in Linda's hand grew heavy, as if tethered to a different time. When the dialing stopped, the phone rang again. But this time, it wasn't the shrill ring of the vintage phone. It was the chime of Mark's modern radio. The radio crackled. "Unit 21, status check!" Sarah's voice came through, concerned. "Mark? Linda? You're not responding?" Mark snapped out of his stupor. He grabbed his shoulder mic. "Dispatch, we're here. Something's off. There's a room. We need backup. Static." "Say again, Unit 21? You're barely readable." The figure turned its faceless head toward Mark, as if hearing Sarah through the radio. Its smooth face rippled, and for a split second, Mark saw features emerge. Hollow eyes, a gaping mouth, before they flattened again. It was as if it wore the impression of those it tormented. Mark felt a wave of nausea. He backed away, pulling Linda with him. "We're leaving. Now." Linda dropped the handset. It slammed against the table and dangled by its cord. The voice of Emily continued to plead faintly from the speaker. The figure moved no further. As they retreated through the doorway, Mark glanced back. The room already looked dimmer, the glow fading. The shape stood motionless beside the phone, watching. They rushed up the cellar stairs. Rain pelted their faces as they emerged back into the clearing. For a moment, Mark thought he heard the faint sound of a telephone ringing beneath the thunder. He slammed the cellar door shut, though he was sure there hadn't been a door when they arrived, and backed away. Linda shook. "What was that? What did we just see?" "I don't know," Mark said, panting, "but we're not going back down there without backup." The radio crackled. "Unit 21, state your status," Sarah repeated. "I lost you for a second." Mark took a breath to steady himself. "Dispatch, we're code 4. We're okay. We found something, requesting additional units, and maybe you should record this call." He glanced at Linda. "We heard the original fire call." "Mark, the line is still active," Sarah said. "I'm still talking to her." Chapter 4. Echoes and Memories. Back at the communications center, Sarah sat rigidly, her headset pressing against her ears. Her screen still showed the call connected to the unknown number. The waveform flickered as Emily's voice whispered things that chilled her. The standard call-taking guidelines she had memorized felt inadequate for this. When Emily repeated the same phrases, Sarah followed protocol, asking for the exact location, verifying the callback number, instructing the caller to remain calm. She had to assume someone's life might depend on her ability to glean details. Even though the call seemed to come from the past, it responded as if it were live. She looked up at the clock. It was 11:47 p.m. The incident card she created had grown with notes. Caller reports faceless man. Caller hiding under kitchen table. Brother went to barn and is missing. She added, officers report finding impossible basement room. Heard original fire call. Her supervisor hovered behind her, eyes wide. "This is some kind of sick joke," he whispered. "Her fear is real," Sarah said quietly. Emily's whispers on the line seemed interspersed with other voices now. Deeper, older voices reciting prayers, a woman pleading, a man shouting commands. She picked out phrases. "Get out! It's too hot! Where are the children?" It sounded like multiple calls overlapping. a choir of tragedy. Sarah thought about the training manual she had studied for hours. It emphasized remaining calm, listening to the caller, and following the script, even when the caller's story seemed implausible. The manual didn't cover supernatural interference. She wished it did. She pressed the mute button and turned to her supervisor. "Do we have recordings of the original fire call?" "Archived somewhere, maybe," he said. "It happened in '95, before digital. They would have had tape. We could check the evidence locker." "Get them. I think we need to hear what happened." The supervisor nodded and hurried toward the back office. Sarah turned her attention back to the call. She heard Mark's voice now, faint, as if far away. "Dispatch. We need backup." She patched the call to his channel and listened as he described the room and the faceless figure. "Mark, I'm going to send units," she said. "Stay outside. Do not go back in until they arrive." Static answered her. She hoped he heard. To her right, another dispatcher raised her hand. "I'm getting a call from that same number," she whispered. "Another call from the Miller place." Sarah frowned. She patched the call to her monitor. A man's voice, gruff and frantic, filled her ears. 911, there's a fire at the Miller farm. The whole house is going up." "Sir, I already have units on the way," Sarah responded, her voice steady. "Are you inside the house?" "No, I was driving by. I saw flames. There's a girl on the porch." The line crackled and cut out. Sarah stared at the screen. Another call popped up, then another. All from the same unknown number, all reporting the same fire. Each call sounded slightly different, as if from different perspectives. One was a child, one an elderly man, one a neighbor's terrified wife. It was as though every call made that night was being replayed simultaneously, bleeding into the present. She realized then that the call wasn't just a recording, it was an echo, an imprint. It had been triggered by something, perhaps the storm, perhaps the way time and memory can loop in on itself in places of great trauma, or perhaps something in the basement had called them. The guidelines Sarah had internalized about remaining calm and following procedure anchored her. She continued to answer each call, to treat each voice with respect. She asked names, ages, whether anyone was conscious or breathing. She repeated addresses, promised that help was on the way. Even if she was speaking into the past, she owed them that dignity. Chapter 5. Secrets in the Cellar. Back at the Miller place, rain continued to fall. Mark and Linda waited by their cruiser, lights flashing, hands on their holsters. The clearing remained empty except for the looming chimney and the closed cellar door. The air felt charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. Mark's mind replayed the images from the basement, the preserved room, the faceless figure, the telephone dial being spun by a ghostly hand. He shivered despite the humidity. Minutes stretched. The backup units took longer than usual, hindered by the weather and the muddy road. Mark kept glancing at the tree line. Shadows seemed to move just beyond the reach of his lights, though when he focused on them, they stilled. "Do you hear that?" Linda whispered. Mark listened. At first, he heard only rain and distant thunder. Then he caught it, the faint sound of voices, like a crowd murmuring. He couldn't make out words, but the cadence was unmistakable. It came from all around, as if the clearing itself were remembering. He turned to the chimney. For a moment, he saw flames dancing around it, an illusion superimposed on reality. He blinked, and the flames vanished. Then he saw small handprints appear in the soot, sliding down, as if someone were trapped inside and trying to claw their way out. They faded as quickly as they had appeared. "We should leave," Linda said. "This isn't our scene. This is something else." "We can't just leave," Mark said. "If there's even a chance someone is down there, we have to help. You heard her. She asked us not to let him in." Linda laughed, a sharp sound. "Mark, think about what we saw. That room doesn't exist. That call is from decades ago. We can't change what happened." Mark looked down at the ground. She was right. But he couldn't shake the feeling that their presence mattered. Maybe the loop continued because no one had responded properly. Maybe those calls had gone unanswered, and the echoes persisted, waiting for closure. Headlights flashed through the trees as additional units arrived. 2 more cruisers and a fire engine pulled into the clearing. Deputy Anthony Vargas and Deputy Sarah Kim stepped out, confusion written on their faces. "What's going on?" Vargas asked. "Dispatch said something about a cellar?" Mark briefed them quickly. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to unease. The rain seemed to intensify, drumming on their hats. The fire crew, wearing turnout gear, looked at the charred foundation dubiously. "There's nothing to put out," the lieutenant said, shining a flashlight into the cellar opening. "It's not a fire we're fighting," Mark said. We heard voices. Something down there." "You're telling me you saw a ghost?" the lieutenant asked, half joking. Mark didn't answer. Instead, he descended the stairs once more, this time with Linda and Vargas behind him. Their boots splashed in puddles. The basement was as dark as before. But when they reached the doorway to the finished room, the blue glow was gone. The room now looked like the rest of the cellar. Old, charred, and crumbling. The table with the lace cloth was a pile of ash. The rotary phone lay on the ground, melted and cracked. "It's gone?" Linda whispered. Vargas knelt by the ashes. He sifted through them gently and found something metallic. He held it up. It was a small bell, tarnished but intact, engraved with the year 1963. He pocketed it without thinking. A gust of cold air blew through the room, swirling the ashes. Mark looked around. "Maybe we triggered something earlier," he said. "Maybe it needed to be acknowledged." They returned to the surface, leaving the ashes undisturbed. The fire lieutenant shook his head. "There's nothing here, but that doesn't mean nothing happened. We'll file the report. Say we found no one." Mark nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He felt a weight settle in his chest. The weight of unsolved mysteries, of lives lost without closure, of voices that lingered. He wondered whether Emily and her family would ever find peace. Chapter 6. The Archives. 2 nights later, Sarah sat in the evidence room of the sheriff's office with a box of dusty tapes. The label on one read, "Miller Farm Fire, 1995. She had insisted on listening. She needed to know if the call she had answered that night matched the original. Her supervisor had been reluctant. The case had been closed decades ago, the tapes sealed. But unusual circumstances called for unusual actions. She fed the tape into an old player and pressed play. Static filled the air, then a faint dial tone. The call began. Dispatcher. 911. What's the address of your emergency? Caller, female, young. It's the old farmhouse on County Road 52. The kitchen is on fire. Mommy told me to call. Dispatcher. Okay, sweetheart. What's your name?
Caller. Emily.
It was the same voice. Sarah felt a chill. She listened as the dispatcher from 1995, her voice steadier than Sarah felt, asked the 4 universal questions. What happened? How old? Is anyone conscious? Is anyone breathing? Emily answered, her voice trembling. She described smoke, flames, her brother upstairs. The dispatcher calmly instructed her to leave the house, to stay low to the ground, to call for her parents. The call ended when Emily screamed and the line went dead. Sarah wiped a tear. She listened to the second tape, a call from a neighbor reporting flames, another from a passing driver, one from a firefighter's wife. Each call captured a different angle of the tragedy. It was as though the night had been full of voices crying into the void, hoping someone would hear. She thought about what had happened in the basement. Perhaps the old phone had become a conduit. Maybe the trauma of that night had imprinted itself on the objects that remained: the bell, the table, the phone. And the storm had reactivated it. She wondered whether other tragedies left similar scars on the fabric of time, waiting to be triggered by unsuspecting passers-by. The guidelines she followed and the protocols she recited were meant to ensure help arrived swiftly and efficiently. But they couldn't account for calls across decades, yet they had anchored her during the call. She realized that the training might not just serve those living. Sometimes, perhaps, the act of listening mattered even to voices from the past. To be heard, even belatedly, was to be honored. Chapter 7. Reverberations.
Act again.
The story of the Miller call spread through the department quickly. Officers swapped tales in the break room, some skeptical, others oddly reverent. The younger deputies listened with wide eyes, asking Mark and Linda to retell what they saw. Each time the details remained consistent: the preserved room, the faceless entity, the vintage phone. The story took on the cadence of a campfire tale. The town itself buzzed. A local journalist wrote a piece about the haunted call, interviewing neighbors who remembered the 1995 fire. She quoted dispatch guidelines about the importance of staying calm and following instructions during emergencies. She interviewed psychologists who explained that trauma can linger in communities like an echo. She interviewed a folklore professor who spoke about thin places, where the veil between past and present wears thin. For a while, curious teenagers stayed away from the Miller place. They left candles at the base of the chimney, notes that read, "We hear you." Some claimed to hear whispers when the wind blew. Others insisted the story was invented to keep kids from trespassing. Either way, the clearing remained undisturbed for months. Sarah found herself changed. She had taken hundreds of calls since that night, from heart attacks to car crashes to domestic disputes. She approached each call with the same calm, but with a new reverence. Even when the caller could not hear her, as with butt dials or misdials, she listened for a beat longer. She thought of Emily's voice trapped in the telephone, waiting for someone to listen. Mark and Linda resumed their regular patrols, but each time they drove past County Road 52, they slowed, eyes drawn to the gap in the trees where the driveway lay. They didn't speak of that night often, but when they did, they found solace in the knowledge that they had answered a call no one else could. Whether they changed anything was unclear, but they had witnessed something extraordinary, and, in a strange way, had provided comfort to a voice that had cried for help for decades. The bell Vargas had pocketed sat on his desk. Occasionally, it tinkled softly when no one touched it. He would glance up, half expecting to see the faceless figure from the basement. He considered returning it, but he feared disturbing whatever rest the spirits had found. Instead, he kept it close, a reminder of the thin line between his world and the echoes beneath. Chapter 8. A New Call. A year later, on a clear night, the communications center phones were quiet. Sarah's shift neared its end when a beep signaled an incoming call. She pressed her foot on the foot pedal to answer, reciting the familiar greeting. 911, what's the address of your emergency? She said. Silence. Then a child's voice, faint but distinct. It's the old farmhouse off County Road 52. He's knocking. Sarah's heart skipped. She looked at the date. It was the anniversary of the fire. The call had returned, but this time Sarah was prepared. She had spent months thinking about how to respond if the call came back. She had consulted with counselors and researchers. She had studied recordings of the original call and compared them to the call she answered. She believed that perhaps by acknowledging the past and offering closure, they could lay the echo to rest. She took a deep breath, steadied her voice, and began. Emily, she said gently, I'm here. I hear you. We've sent help. We know you're scared, but you're not alone. We'll stay with you. The voice hesitated. Is he there? No, Sarah lied, though she felt that the truth was more complicated. He can't hurt you anymore. You're safe. The static seemed to ease. The rain outside was gentle this time, a soft patter. Sarah imagined Emily's small hand clutching the phone, eyes wide, smoke curling in the air. She pictured herself reaching across time, offering comfort. She imagined the faceless figure listening, perhaps softening. Will you stay with me? Emily whispered. Yes, Sarah said. I'll stay with you. She spoke to her for minutes that felt like hours, repeating reassurance, telling her about the officers who had gone to the farmhouse and made sure no one else was hurt. She told her about how the community remembered her family, how the town had grown. She told her about the new fire station built near County Road 52 and the training the firefighters received. She told her about how important it is to call 911 in an emergency and how dispatchers will always answer and help. She told her that she mattered. Eventually, the line went silent. The connection dropped with a soft click. The ALI still displayed no location, no callback number. Sarah sat back, tears on her cheeks. She didn't know if her words had reached Emily, if they had traveled across time, or if she had simply comforted herself. But she felt a sense of peace that she hadn't felt since that stormy night, a year before. Chapter 9. Aftermath. Life moved on. The Miller place remained a ruin, but its story had become woven into the fabric of the town. The local school's drama club staged a play inspired by the event, focusing on the bravery of dispatchers and the importance of calling 911 responsibly. They included a scene where the dispatcher calmly asks the universal questions, despite the panic. Audience members wept and applauded. Sarah sat in the back row, feeling both proud and humbled. The department created a training module based on the incident. Trainees listened to the original call and discussed how to handle anomalous incidents with professionalism and empathy. They emphasized the need to follow procedure, to confirm addresses, to gather details, to stay on the line, even when the call defied explanation. The module reminded them that emergency communications is a cornerstone of public safety, and that dispatchers often serve as the first line of defense. Mark eventually transferred to the detective division, drawn by a desire to solve long, cold cases. But the Miller call stayed with him. It fueled his interest in unsolved crimes and missing persons. He spent nights poring over case files, wondering how many other voices lingered between worlds, waiting for someone to listen. Linda took a job as a training officer. She told new recruits about the night at the Miller place, not to scare them, but to teach them that police work involves more than writing tickets and making arrests. It is about bearing witness, about carrying stories, about sometimes confronting things that cannot be explained. She told them to respect the calls they respond to, whether they involve domestic disputes, stray dogs, or spectral voices. Sarah continued to work the night shift. Each beep of an incoming call still sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. She treated each caller with the same patience and composure, whether it was a medical emergency or a frightened teenager whispering into the phone. When calls about emergencies poured in, she asked the necessary questions, gathered the needed information, and reassured the callers that help was on the way. When calls about the past found their way through, she listened just as intently. Chapter 10. The Watcher. Years passed. The old farmhouse foundation began to crumble further, swallowed by weeds. Local kids whispered about a faceless man who roamed the woods. The legend evolved. Some said he was the spirit of the arsonist who had burned the house. Others said he was a manifestation of tragedy itself, a watcher drawn to places where calls went unanswered. One autumn evening, long after the Miller call had faded from memory, a young man named Alex was driving home from his job at the diner. He had never heard the story. His phone rang. It was his little sister, Tessa, who lived across town. "Alex?" Tessa's voice trembled. "Someone is knocking on the door. Mom's not home, I'm scared." Alex frowned. "Did you call 911? "No. I didn't know if I should. Is it bad to call if you're not sure?" Alex remembered the general rules he'd read once, that 911 is for emergencies, serious medical problems, life-threatening situations, fires, or crimes in progress. This seemed like a potential threat. "Call them," he said firmly. "They'll help. They'll tell you what to do. They'll stay on the line until help arrives." "Will they? They won't be mad." "No," Alex said. "That's what they're there for. They'll ask you questions about what's happening, about where you are and who's there. Answer them. Stay calm. Don't hang up until they tell you it's okay." Tessa sniffled. "Okay, I'll call." Alex kept her on his phone as she dialed 911 on the house landline. He heard a dispatcher answer, calm and precise. 911, what's the address of your emergency?" The dispatcher asked the universal questions, just as Sarah had asked Emily years before. Tessa answered, voice quivering but audible. The dispatcher promised help and instructed her to hide in a closet until officers arrived. Alex sped toward her house, heart pounding. In the distance, he saw blue lights converging on his street. Officers entered the home and found Tessa safe. The knocking had been a drunk neighbor who had stumbled to the wrong house. It was a false alarm, but one treated with seriousness and care. No one scolded Tessa for calling. They praised her for taking action. Alex felt relief wash over him. Later, as he drove home, he thought about the dispatcher who had taken Tessa's call, the calm voice that had anchored her. He realized that there are people on the other end of the line whose only job is to listen and help, whether the call is about a break-in, a heart attack, or an echo from the past. He whispered a thank you into the night. Chapter 11. The Line Between. The story you just heard is not easily categorized. It is part ghost story, part reminder. It is rooted in a real process, the way emergency services function, and in the idea that calls are sacred threads between those who need help and those who can provide it. When you dial 911, a dispatcher will ask you where you are, what happened, your callback number, and critical details about those involved. They will stay with you until they are sure help has arrived. They will instruct you to remain calm and to follow their guidance. Even when the circumstances are unthinkable or unbelievable, they will follow procedure. That night at the Miller farm, A call from decades past reached across time because no one had listened long enough. Sarah, Mark, Linda, and others answered. They listened. They witnessed. They honored the voices of those lost. Whether it changed the past is unknown, but in the present, it changed them. There are countless emergencies every day that test the mettle of dispatchers and first responders. Each call holds a story, sometimes heroic, sometimes tragic, sometimes mundane. And sometimes, perhaps, there are calls that remind us that time is not as linear as we think. Voices can linger. Echoes can reverberate. The act of listening, of taking a call seriously, can be an act of grace. So if you ever hear a faint knock, if you ever hear a whisper on the line, remember, someone is waiting for you to listen. And if you ever need help, do not hesitate. Call 911. Tell them where you are and what's wrong. Answer their questions. Stay on the line. Help will come. Footnotes. Sources for emergency call procedures and guidelines. Research on 911 dispatch protocols emphasizes that when a call is received, dispatchers must quickly determine the appropriate agency response, law enforcement, fire, or medical, and use clearly written protocols to guide decisions. Nashville's Department of Emergency Communications outlines what callers should expect when dialing 911. A trained telecommunicator will ask for the address, callback number, and key details about the situation. Callers are instructed to remain calm, answer all questions, and not hang up until told to do so. The guidelines also highlight general house rules for using 911, such as only calling for serious medical problems, life-threatening situations, fires, or crimes in progress. These procedures grounded the fictional call in reality. Prologue. In the rolling hills of Appalachia, where fog curls through the hollows and the air smells of pine and damp earth, there is a town that locals pretend not to remember. They drive past the exit on the highway and talk loudly over their children when anyone mentions the name Willow Creek. It isn't on maps anymore, but if you travel far enough down Route 19 and turn where the old gas station used to stand, the asphalt turns into gravel, the radio turns to static, and the world feels a little thinner than it should be. It was in this forgotten valley that Janelle Harper, a 25-year-old documentary filmmaker from Chicago, found herself on a sun-bleached August afternoon. Her grandmother's house, a sagging colonial with peeling paint and a porch that had once been white, sat at the end of a dirt lane lined with towering pines. The pines whispered in the breeze as if trading secrets. Janelle swore the sound formed words she almost understood, but she blamed it on her nerves. She had only meant to stay for a weekend, to catalog her grandmother's belongings before the estate sale, and to see if there was anything to save from the bulldozers that would soon flatten the property. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Willow Creek was a place that thrived on stories. And once she began to listen, once she became part of a story herself, leaving would be much harder than she imagined. Chapter 1. Homecoming. Janelle rolled her suitcase over the uneven wooden boards, the wheels catching on nails that had risen with humidity and time. The house groaned around her, settling as if acknowledging her arrival. A faint smell of lavender, dust, and something metallic hung in the air. Her grandmother, Evelyn Harper, had passed away in April, and the house had been empty since then. The refrigerator hummed. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked unevenly. Otherwise, the quiet pressed against her ears. She left her bags in the front hall and wandered through rooms filled with memories she didn't quite own. Doilies on furniture she never sat on, faded photographs of distant cousins, a china cabinet packed with porcelain that would end up boxed and sold. She ran her fingers along the mantel and came away with a coat of gray. Janelle had grown up visiting this house every summer until she left for college. Yet now, it felt both familiar and alien, like stepping into a dream that was almost real. As dusk bled into night, the forest outside darkened into a single mass. Crickets sang and something larger, a fox, a deer, brushed through the underbrush. Janelle flipped the light switch on the wall. Nothing happened. She tried again. The lamp above flickered, sputtered, and died. She sighed, set down her purse, and headed to the basement to check the fuse box. The basement stairs creaked with each step, the air growing colder and damper. Her phone's flashlight cast a narrow beam that revealed concrete walls and shelves stacked with mason jars. Each jar held peaches, tomatoes, beans. Her grandmother had canned everything, believing in preserving, in saving for winter. The fuse box hung on the far wall, and when Janelle opened it, she saw that one of the switches had tripped. She flicked it back. Lights above came on, a warm glow filtering down the stairs. That was when she first heard it. A soft voice, like the rustling of leaves, whispering her name. Janelle. A chill rose along her spine. She spun, flashlight dancing across the masonry. "Hello?" she called. Only the ticking of pipes answered. She laughed nervously at herself. Old houses made noises. The pines outside rubbed together and sounded like voices. She was tired. Still, as she climbed back into the kitchen, she could have sworn she saw, in the corner of her eye, a shadow melt into the wall. Chapter 2. The Librarian. The next morning, sunlight slanted through lace curtains, turning dust motes into golden confetti. Janelle brewed coffee, the aroma grounding her. She had work to do, boxes to sort, antiques to photograph. Yet, as she sat at the kitchen table, sipping from her grandmother's chipped mug, she couldn't stop thinking about the voice she thought she heard. She shook her head to dismiss it and pulled out her notebook. She had promised herself she'd document everything, maybe even make a short film about the process. People loved a good inheritance story. Nostalgia was currency. After breakfast, she decided to head into town to the library, hoping to find old photos of the area. The drive took 20 minutes down winding roads flanked by forests. When she arrived, she found that Willow Creek's downtown consisted of a post office, a diner called Mabel's, and a small brick building with Public Library etched above its door. The bell chimed when she entered, and the cool, book-scented air embraced her. The librarian, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a bun, looked up from her desk. Her name tag read, Mrs. Green. "Can I help you?" she asked with a voice like brittle paper. "Hi, I'm Janelle Harper," she said. "I'm in town to take care of Evelyn Harper's estate. She was my grandmother." Mrs. Green's expression softened. "Ah, Evelyn. She was a good woman. I was sorry to hear she passed." She glanced over Janelle's shoulder, as if checking to see who else might have come in. "What can I do for you?" "I'm looking for any historical records, photographs, local lore. I want to understand more about the place. I grew up visiting, but I don't know much about its past." Mrs. Green hesitated, her eyes darting toward a shelf in the back. "We have a local history section," she said slowly. "Not much to it. People around here keep their stories to themselves. But you're welcome to look." She led Janelle to a corner, where a few binders and faded books sat on a wooden table. "Most folks don't bother," she murmured. "Some things are better left alone." "I just want to know what my family was part of," Janelle said. Mrs. Green pursed her lips. "Just remember, stories have weight. They stick to you." She returned to her desk, leaving Janelle with the dusty volumes. The binders contained newspaper clippings from the early 1900s, reports of floods washing away bridges, harvest festivals, the occasional missing person. One photo, yellowed with age, showed a group of men standing outside a church, their faces blurred. Underneath it, a caption read, "Volunteers gather to search for missing children, October 1934. The accompanying article described 3 siblings, last seen walking into the pine forest. They were never found. Another clipping from 1978 mentioned a fire at the old mill at the edge of town. Witnesses claimed they saw figures dancing in the flames, but authorities blamed faulty wiring. The pattern was always the same: unnatural occurrences explained away by mundane reasons, a strange absence of detail, a reluctance to probe. As Janelle flipped through the pages, a piece of folded paper fluttered out and landed at her feet. It was a letter, written in careful cursive. "If you are reading this, then perhaps you are not from here. Do not listen to the trees. They will tell you stories you cannot forget. They will offer you promises you cannot refuse. Leave now, and do not look back." Her pulse quickened. She glanced toward the front desk, but Mrs. Green was reading, unaware. Was this a joke? A prank by a bored teen? Or a genuine warning from decades past? She slipped the letter into her notebook. The pines outside the library window swayed as if nodding. Chapter 3. Nightfall. The sun slipped behind the ridge earlier than she expected, drawing long shadows across the kitchen floor. Janelle spent the day packing ceramic figurines and photographing furniture for an auction catalog. She found a jewelry box hidden in the back of a closet, and inside, a locket with a photo of her grandmother as a young woman. The man beside her in the photo was handsome, with a strong jaw and eyes that seemed to follow Janelle. She didn't recognize him. Her grandfather had died before she was born, but this wasn't him. She made a mental note to ask her mother if she dared. That evening, as she sat on the porch, a truck rattled down the lane. A man stepped out, tall and lean, his hair peppered with gray. He wore work boots and a flannel shirt. "You must be Evelyn's granddaughter," he called out. "I am," Janelle said, standing. "And you are?" "Name's Caleb Bryant," he said, offering his hand. "I live up the hill. Your grandma and I were neighbors for 40 years. I figured I'd come see if you needed anything." "That's kind of you," she said. His grip was calloused and firm. Caleb's gaze drifted to the pine line. "House holding up okay? Strange noises?" Janelle laughed nervously. "It's an old house. It creaks. And the trees, well, they do whisper." He nodded solemnly. "They do more than that." He looked around as if someone might be listening. "Your grandma knew how to keep them quiet. She hung bells in the branches. You might have noticed them when you drove in." Janelle recalled glimpsing wind chimes hanging from the pines. They had been still, their chimes tangled. "Why bells?" she asked. Caleb shrugged. "Old superstition. When the bells stop ringing, the stories come closer." Evelyn believed in that sort of thing. "Me, I just avoid the woods after dark." He shifted his weight. "Listen, I don't mean to scare you, but folks around here know better than to go wandering at night. If you hear anything out there calling your name, you keep the door shut and don't answer." Calling my name? She repeated, goosebumps rising on her arms despite the warm night. They'll mimic voices, he said quietly. Voices of people you love. They'll use whatever it takes. A silence stretched between them. In the distance, an owl hooted. Caleb sighed and turned back to his truck. If you need help, come on up the hill. We don't get many visitors. Maybe that's for the best. He drove off, leaving a trail of dust that hung in the air like a curtain. That night, Janelle double-checked the locks. The pines whispered her name once, twice, like a dare. She pulled the covers up to her chin and put earbuds in, playing soft music to drown out the sounds. Sleep came fitfully, full of twisted dreams. Children standing in the woods, their eyes hollow. Her grandmother ringing a bell with frantic urgency. A man with a strong jaw whispering, "It's almost time." Chapter 4. Echoes of the Past. The following day, Janelle sat at the kitchen table with a stack of her grandmother's journals. Each was bound in leather, the pages filled with tight, neat handwriting. She turned to a random entry dated October 12th, 1987. The bells fell silent last night. Heard them clatter at 12:21 exactly. Sat up straight in bed, heart pounding. I could feel them watching from the trees. Caleb's dog, Ranger, barked until he was hoarse. Heard Mama's voice outside the window. Mama's been dead 30 years. I did not answer. I'm writing this so I remember. Do not answer. Janelle swallowed. She flipped ahead. July 3rd, 1994. Saw a young girl wander past the porch at dusk. Blonde hair, nightgown dirty as soot, followed by the sound of water dripping. She stopped and looked at me, eyes black as coal. She smiled and said, "Auntie Evelyn? Come play with us in the pines." My heart near stopped. I told her no. She shrugged and disappeared like smoke. My hands are shaking as I write. There are more of them now. She read on, pages describing knocks at windows, voices calling, bells tangled by unseen hands. Her grandmother had kept the house safe with rituals. Salt on the doorstep, bells in the branches, never answering. She wrote about the origin of the whispering, a folk tale told by her own mother. In the early 1900s, a group of settlers from the east had arrived in Willow Creek, seeking land and freedom. Among them was a charismatic preacher who preached about new beginnings and the thinness of the veil between worlds. He claimed the forest was holy, a place where one could converse with ancestors. Families followed him into the pines one autumn evening to hold a midnight vigil. Only the preacher returned, babbling about voices in the trees. He died days later, eyes milky white, his tongue swollen. The rest were never found. Soon after, townspeople began hearing whispers when the wind was still, seeing shadows moving on windless nights. They hung bells to keep the whispers at bay. Bells that must never be allowed to fall silent. Janelle closed the journal, pressing her palms to her eyes. Rationally, she knew these were stories, folklore, superstitions. But her grandmother's fear bled from every line, and Janelle had heard her name whispered in the basement. Caleb's warning echoed in her mind. She set the journal aside and stood, restless. "I need air," she said aloud to no one. She grabbed her camera, hoping filming would distract her. Maybe she could capture the pines, the house, the bells. Maybe she would tell a story about her grandmother's strange beliefs and present it as a curiosity. She stepped off the porch and into the yard. The wind had died, and the air hung heavy and still. She turned on the camera and aimed at the tree line. Through the lens, the pines seemed deeper, darker. She zoomed in on one of the bells. It hung motionless, the clapper tangled in twine. As she adjusted focus, she spotted something pale between the trunks, a flash of white cloth. She lowered the camera. Was someone there? "Hello," she called. No answer. She raised the camera again. The cloth was gone. A twig snapped behind her. She spun. A woman stood at the edge of the yard, her back to Janelle. She wore a long dress stained at the hem with mud. Her hair fell in tangled waves down her back. Janelle's mouth went dry. "Excuse me," she managed. The woman turned slowly. Her face was wrong, not monstrous, but blurred like an overexposed photograph. Her features seemed to shift, eyes where cheeks should be, mouth sliding. Then, as Janelle blinked, it sharpened into focus. It was her grandmother, Evelyn, looking exactly as she had the last time Janelle saw her alive. "Gram?" Janelle whispered. Evelyn smiled. "Janelle, come help me hang the laundry," she said, voice smooth and warm. "It's going to rain." Heat flooded Janelle's chest. Her eyes stung. It was impossible. Yet the woman before her looked so real, so familiar. She took a step toward the figure, then stopped. In her mind, she heard Caleb's warning. They'll mimic voices of people you love. They'll use whatever it takes. Her grandmother had written, "Do not answer." Janelle's throat tightened. "No," she said, her voice trembling. "You're not her." The woman's smile faltered, her eyes darkened, and her mouth lengthened unnaturally wide. "Fine," she hissed. The word carried the sound of wind through dead branches. The face melted, features sliding like wax. Fingers elongated into twig-like appendages. The figure shrank backward into the trees and was gone. The bells began to sway, clanging out discordant notes, though there was no wind. Janelle stumbled back onto the porch, heart racing, and slammed the door behind her. She leaned against it, breathing hard. Her hands shook as she locked the deadbolt. She whispered to herself, "It's not real. It's not real. It's—" She stopped. Outside, muffled through the wooden door, she heard a voice crying softly, "Janelle? Let me in. Please, I'm scared." It was her mother's voice, her mother, who was at her home in Chicago. Janelle covered her ears. Tears slid down her cheeks. She sat there until the voice faded and the bell stilled. Chapter 5. The Archive. The following morning, Janelle drove back to the library, desperation propelling her. She needed answers. Mrs. Green's eyes widened when she saw the dark circles under Janelle's eyes. "You didn't sleep," she said, more statement than question. "No," Janelle admitted. I saw something last night. Someone. It looked like my grandmother." Mrs. Green pressed her lips together. "You're not the first."
What are they?
Janelle whispered. Mrs. Green gestured for her to follow. She led her through a door marked "Staff Only" into a back room filled with boxes and file cabinets. She opened a drawer and pulled out a yellow folder. Inside were handwritten notes, transcripts, and audio tapes in battered cases. She set them on the table. During the 70s, some students from the university came through here. Thought they'd write a paper on Willow Creek folklore. They interviewed anyone who would talk. Most folks didn't, but a few did. The students left, turned in a half-hearted report, and forgot about it. They never came back. She tapped the folder. These are the raw interviews. I kept them. Figured maybe one day they'd be of use. Janelle sifted through the pages. Transcripts of elders speaking in hushed tones about the whispering, about voices calling from the pines, about children who answered and were never seen again. One transcript caught her eye. The interviewee was listed as E.H. and dated June 1974. She read, "Interviewer, can you tell me what happened the night in 1959 when the Miller twins disappeared?" Vondarboy, no one disappears. They're taken, or they join, hard to say which. The bells hadn't been ringing for days. Everyone said, "Oh, it's just the storm. It tangled the ropes." But I knew. You have to untangle them. You have to keep them ringing. Mary Miller said she heard her own voice calling from the trees. Said she wanted to see what she wanted from herself. Ridiculous. But curiosity is a killer, isn't it? They went. We never saw them again. But sometimes I hear them laughing at night. They haven't aged. Don't age at all. Interviewer, do you know why the bells keep them away? Amboich. Sound carries through the veil, pure metal, disrupts them, confuses them. They can't stand it for long, but they always find ways to stop the bells. They're patient. They've been here longer than us. Janelle read E.H. and realized it was her grandmother. Evelyn had given an interview once, years before she ever told Janelle bedtime stories. The weight of generations pressing warnings into her felt heavy. "Why didn't people leave?" Janelle asked, eyes burning. Mrs. Green shrugged. Where would they go? This was their home. And some can't leave. There are roads you take that loop back. Folks have tried. Sometimes they make it. Sometimes they turn up on the highway, wandering and confused. Sometimes they don't turn up at all. She looked at Janelle. There are more stories than you'll find in any book. But what matters is that this place feeds on those who listen too closely. If you want to survive, you should tie more bells, keep the windows shut at night, and don't follow voices into the trees. And then what? Stay here forever? Sell the house? Selling might work, or it might bring someone else here who isn't ready. Mrs. Green's eyes softened. You're a storyteller, aren't you? I've seen your documentaries. Stories like this, they don't like being told. She placed a hand on the folder. If you decide to leave, do it without telling anyone. Don't even tell the house. Just go. Janelle nodded, clutching the folder. Thank you. Chapter 6. Nodding Bells. That afternoon, Janelle drove to the nearest hardware store and bought every bell they had. Tiny brass ones, large iron ones, Went chimes of all shapes. She spent hours in the yard with a stepladder, untangling the old bells and hanging new ones. The pines towered above her, their branches thick. She climbed until her arms ached, tying bells with thick rope, making sure each clapper swung freely. The forest watched with silent patience. Caleb came by as the sun dipped low. He leaned against a fence post, arms crossed, watching. "Looks like you've been busy," he said. "You were right," Janelle said without preamble. "Something's out there." Caleb nodded slowly. "I know." He glanced at the bells. "These might buy you some quiet nights, but they won't like it." "What are they?" Janelle demanded. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I can tell you the stories. Could tell you about the preacher and his church, about the search parties that never came back, about folks who got so desperate to hear from loved ones that they invited them in. But the truth is, no one knows. Some say they're the spirits of those who disappeared, twisted into something unnatural. Others think they're older than that, older than people. Maybe the forest itself talking. What matters is, they feed on attention, on grief, on stories. If you acknowledge them, answer them, they get stronger. He shuffled his feet. Evelyn kept them at bay. She was stubborn, but she also stayed. She believed if she left, they'd follow her. We don't know if that's true. Some folks who left had no trouble. Others, well, you hear their voices sometimes. Janelle swallowed. I can't stay here forever. This isn't my home. No, Caleb agreed. It isn't. But don't let them trick you into thinking you don't have a choice. They'll use fear, and they'll use hope. They'll promise you knowledge. They'll promise you a reunion. They'll promise fame if you film them. But all they want is to pull you in, to make you part of their story. Janelle looked at her camera bag on the porch. She had been filming earlier. The idea of capturing a whisper, a shadow, had felt tempting. People loved a haunting. Views, subscribers, sponsors. She thought about the voice that had sounded like her mother and felt nausea. I won't, she said. I don't want to be part of their story. Caleb smiled sadly. Too late for that. They're already in yours. That's what they do. But there's still time to choose how it ends. Chapter 7. The Mirror Room. That night, Janelle explored the house to distract herself. In the attic, she found a door hidden behind stacks of quilts and trunks. It was small, with a simple brass knob. She had never noticed it. She hesitated, then opened it. A narrow staircase led down. She followed, ducking beneath low beams, and emerged into a small room she'd never seen. The room was lined with mirrors of all shapes and sizes. Some were ornate with gilded frames. Others were simple rectangles. In the center of the floor lay a circle of salt, unbroken. Within the circle sat a stool, and a single candle burned low, wax pooling. The air smelled of lavender and iron. She recognized this place. Her grandmother had told her once, in a voice tinged with both pride and sorrow, about a secret room where she could speak to the dead. Janelle had thought she'd been joking, yet here it was. On the wall hung another journal, open to a page. It was Evelyn's handwriting again. This is the mirror room. Only use it in emergencies. The mirrors show you what's around you that you can't see, but they also let them see you. Circle of salt must remain unbroken. Candle must stay lit. Do not stay past midnight. Do not answer any offer. Janelle felt like she had stumbled into the mouth of the story. The urge to run warred with curiosity. She could set up her camera here, record an authentic ghost story. She could see if the figures that prowled the pines could be captured. She could talk to her grandmother. Her throat tightened, but the warnings echoed louder. She stepped into the salt circle, feeling ridiculous, and lit the candle with a lighter she found on a shelf. The flame flickered, casting light onto the mirrors. For a moment, all she saw was her own reflection, a tired woman with messy hair, her eyes too wide. Then, slowly, the reflections changed. Behind her, in the mirror to her left, she saw a shadow move along the wall. In another, a pale hand pressed against glass. The candle guttered, and in the largest mirror across from her, she saw the living room, except it wasn't quite right. The furniture was arranged differently, the colors wrong. In the mirror, her grandmother sat in her favorite chair, crocheting. Graham, Janelle breathed, voice barely audible. The figure looked up, her eyes clear. Janelle, she said, you shouldn't be here. Tears welled. I miss you, Janelle whispered. I miss you so much. Evelyn's expression softened. I know, baby. I miss you too. But you can't stay. You need to leave. The story is hungry." Her image flickered as if through static. "I don't know how to leave," Janelle said. "The roads. Caleb said they loop." "You'll find a way," Evelyn replied. "You have to. And you must burn this house when you go." Janelle's heart lurched. "What? I can't." The candle flame stretched, turned blue. The image of Evelyn glitched. Her eyes rolled up, and when she looked back down, they were completely black. Her mouth twisted into a grin that wasn't Evelyn's. "We'll tell your story for you," the not Evelyn said in a chorus of voices layered atop one another. "Stay. Let us weave you into the roots. Think of all the eyes and ears you'll have. Millions, all listening. We can make you famous." The voice hissed, seductive and wrong. "You will never be forgotten." Janelle's skin crawled. She blew out the candle. Darkness rushed in, smothering the room. She stood, heart racing, and stumbled toward the door. The mirrors around her whispered. Fingers brushed her shoulders. She shoved through and slammed the door, breathing hard on the other side. Her own reflection stared back at her from a small mirror in the hall. Her eyes looked older. Chapter 8. The Choice. Janelle spent the next day in a fog. She sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, staring at the pines. The bells chimed softly in the morning breeze, sounding like far-off laughter. Her mind replayed the voice in the mirror room. "We can make you famous. The house would make a great viral video." The story had all the elements. A cursed town, a tragic history, strange occurrences. If she filmed and uploaded the footage, if she leaned into the phenomenon, she could get millions of views. She could be known for something more than small independent films. She could tell the story from the inside. She could warn people. Or she could trap them. She imagined viewers commenting, debating the authenticity, traveling to Willow Creek to see for themselves. More eyes, more ears, more attention. The thing in the mirror had known exactly what to offer her. She looked at her grandmother's journals, at the interview transcripts, at the bells. Her grandmother had resisted her entire life. Evelyn had sacrificed loneliness to keep others safe. Janelle realized that the house, the forest, the whispers were like a parasitic plant. They needed hosts. They needed an audience. They needed someone to pass on the tale. What better vector than the internet? She could leave. She could pack her things, untie the bells, and go. But the house would remain. Someone else would inherit the story. Unless she did what Evelyn asked. Burn it down. Destroy the anchor. But what if that only made them angry? What if it freed them to roam without a focal point? Her mind spun. Caleb arrived, carrying a basket of vegetables. "You look like you haven't slept in years," he observed. "Do you think burning the house would help?" she asked bluntly. He blinked. "Why would you do that?" "My grandmother told me to," Janelle said. "In the mirror room. Or something that looked like her did." Caleb set down the basket. "That room. Evelyn said she'd never use it again. She said it lied." "You sure it was her?" "At first it was, then it wasn't." "Then maybe burning the house is exactly what they want," he said. "Maybe they want you to destroy your anchor, to sever your last tie to the world so you have nowhere to go but them. Or maybe destroying it will set them free. I don't know," he sighed. "I do know that leaving without saying goodbye, without making any grand gestures, seems to work for some. They like a show. Don't give them one." Janelle nodded. "What would you do?" Caleb looked out at the pines. "I'd leave, quietly. Maybe sell the land to the state so no one builds here. Put up a fence. Post, no trespassing. Forget. But I ain't you. He put a hand on her shoulder. You don't owe this Pleiades anything. Chapter 9. Departure. That night, Janelle packed. She moved through the house deliberately, filling a single suitcase with clothing and a few small items. The locket from the jewelry box, a handful of photographs, one of her grandmother's journals. She left the interview transcripts on the kitchen table. She took the folded warning letter from the library and placed it in her pocket. The camera she set aside. She wasn't taking it. The bells outside chimed anxiously, as if sensing her intention. The air grew colder, though the thermostat read 70. She looked at the walls she had scribbled on as a child, the banister she had slid down, the kitchen where she had eaten her grandmother's blackberry pies. I love you, she whispered to the house, to her grandmother, to the land. But I'm not yours. She walked to the door, hand on the knob. She heard whispers rise, more insistent. Janelle, they pleaded. Don't go. It's dangerous out there. You'll be forgotten. Stay. Other voices joined. We can show you everything. We can give you stories. We can make them listen. One voice, soft and trembling, was her own. I'm scared. She opened the door. A rush of cold air smacked her. Bells clanged. The voices crescendoed. She stepped onto the porch. The world tilted slightly, as if she stood on a ship deck. She walked to her car. Hands, real or imagined, clutched at her ankles. She shook them off. She opened the car door, slid inside, and turned the key. The engine sputtered and then roared to life. She reversed down the dirt lane, the pines leaning close. The whispers rose, then faded behind her. At the end of the lane, the gravel met asphalt. She took a deep breath. Ahead, the road stretched out, still lined with trees, but thinning. She drove. Each mile, the whispering quieted. She passed the place where the gas station had been. She reached Route 19. She turned onto the highway. For a moment, she held her breath, half expecting the road to loop back to the pines. But the highway continued, taking her towards signs that said, "Welcome to West Virginia," and "Next gas, 30 miles." Relief flooded her. Tears burned. She laughed and sobbed. She drove and didn't look in the rearview mirror for miles. Chapter 10. The Upload. 3 weeks later, in her Chicago apartment, Janelle sat at her desk. Her suitcase was unpacked. Her grandmother's locket hung on a nail above her computer. On her desk sat the memory cards from her time in Willow Creek. She had promised herself she wouldn't use them. She had left the camera behind, but she had recorded bits on her phone. The bells chiming, Caleb talking, the whisper that called her name. She hadn't listened to them since. She thought about the countless people online hungry for content. She thought about the warning letter. She thought about the voice offering her fame. She pulled the memory card toward her. Her finger hovered. She could upload the audio, tell the story, draw millions. She could warn people never to go there. She could keep the forest's legend contained, or she could feed it. She opened her grandmother's journal and reread a sentence. Stories have weight. They stick to you. She closed the journal and slid the memory card into a drawer. She deleted the files from her phone, exhaled, and sat back. She would make a different film. One about letting go. One about the line between honoring the past and escaping it. The pines would whisper to someone else eventually, but not because of her. As she sipped her tea and stared at the city skyline, her phone buzzed. A notification from YouTube popped up. New video recommendation. I stayed in an abandoned house in West Virginia. This happened. She froze. The thumbnail showed a familiar sagging colonial with peeling paint. A young man grinned at the camera in front of it, pointing his thumb over his shoulder. The video had been uploaded 3 hours ago and already had 50,000 views. Janelle's blood went cold. She clicked the video. The vlogger's voice chirped through her speakers. "Hey guys, it's your boy Tyler, and today I'm exploring this creepy old house I found on a ghost forum. They say people hear voices out here. Let's see what happens," he laughed. "Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe for more haunted house adventures." The camera panned to the pines. Bells, newly hung, glinted in the sun. Tyler walked toward the front porch, the door creaking as he entered. For a second, Janelle saw a shadow dart past behind him. She slammed her laptop shut. Her heart pounded. She sat in silence, the city noise outside too loud. She thought of Caleb, of Mrs. Green, of the whispering. She realized that it didn't matter what she did. Stories traveled on their own. Curiosity was insatiable. The question wasn't whether the story would be told. It was who would control the telling. She opened her laptop again, hands shaking. She navigated to her video editor. She imported the clips from her phone. She began to narrate, not for views, but to warn. She told of bells and whispers, of voices that offered everything you wanted. She told them not to go. She told them to let some stories remain untold. She hit upload with her heart in her throat. She watched the progress bar. She whispered to the screen, "I hope you don't listen." As the video processed, she stared at the city lights outside her window and heard, just faintly, the rustle of leaves and a voice, like wind, laughing. Epilogue. Listeners beware. You're hearing this now because the story demanded to be told. Maybe curiosity brought you here. Maybe the algorithm did. Maybe you don't believe in cursed towns or whispering pines. Maybe you think this is just a story. You might even be right. But if you ever find yourself on a gravel road off Route 19, if you see a colonial house sagging under the weight of history, if you hear bells tangled in the trees, and a voice that sounds like someone you love calling your name, remember this. Not all stories want to be told for your benefit. Some want to swallow you whole. Some will mimic your own voice, your deepest desires, your darkest fears. They will promise you that if you listen, if you record, if you share, you will be rewarded. They lie. Turn around. Go home. Let the pines whisper to themselves, and never answer when they call. Afterword, the lingering echo. Weeks stretched into months, and Janelle settled back into city life with a new wariness that she could never quite shake. The rhythm of Chicago, honking horns, sirens, neighbors shouting in the alley, should have drowned out the memory of whispering pines, yet certain quiet moments still caught her off guard. The hiss of her apartment's radiator on winter nights sometimes sounded like her name, drawn out on a breath. When wind gusted through the narrow gap between buildings, it carried with it the high, metallic tremor of bells. She would freeze, heart hammering, until logic reasserted itself, and she moved on. She bought a small brass bell at a flea market and hung it beside her door. An urban talisman she knew was more symbolic than practical, but still eased her mind. After her video went live, the internet did what it does best. Some viewers applauded her restraint, thanking her for the warning and vowing never to seek out the place. Others called her a liar, a clickbait queen, insisting the footage was staged. A handful of commenters begged for coordinates, pleading to be told the exact turnoff on Route 19. One message, from an untraceable account, simply read, "It doesn't matter if you think you stopped the story. We have more voices now." She deleted it and turned off her notifications. Still, late at night, Her curiosity would flicker like a candle. She'd wonder what was happening in Willow Creek, who had listened, who had gone, and whether any bells still rang among those pines. She tried to share what she experienced in other ways. At a storytelling event in a cramped cafe, she recounted a sanitized version of the town's history, stripping it of details that might guide thrill seekers. In therapy, she spoke about the seduction of attention and the fear of being forgotten. Her therapist didn't laugh when she mentioned voices in trees. Instead, she asked about boundaries and how much of yourself you owed an audience. It was a question Janelle had never considered when she began making documentaries. Now it felt central to everything. Each project she took on, each narrative she shaped, she weighed the cost. Whose story was she telling? Who benefited? Who was consumed? Sometimes, walking home with groceries, she would hear a child call her name. Every time, she kept her eyes forward and her pace steady. Once in a department store, she caught a glimpse of herself in a mirror and saw over her shoulder, for a fraction of a heartbeat, the blurred outline of a long-dead pine forest. She blinked, and the image resolved into racks of winter coats. In moments like these, the line between memory and intrusion blurred. She rang the bell on her keychain and the sound grounded her. She reached out to Caleb once, sending a letter that only said, "I left. I hope you are safe." Months later, a postcard arrived from an address she didn't recognize. It bore no message, only a simple drawing of a row of bells hanging from trees. On the back, in pencil, someone had written, "Keep telling your own stories." She taped it above her desk. She never heard from Mrs. Green again. She didn't know if Tyler from the video came back from Willow Creek. She didn't go looking. You might be tempted, after hearing all of this, to scour maps and forums for an abandoned colonial hidden by pines. Perhaps you feel invincible, or maybe you think you can make a better video, one that finally uncovers the truth. If so, consider this. In every era, there are stories that function like traps. They appeal to your vanity, your curiosity, your longing to be special. They lure you with promises of exclusive secrets and viral fame. But when you step into them, you find you are not the storyteller at all. You are material. You are fuel. The narrative goes on with or without you, and it cares little if you are left whole when it's through. So live your life. Make art. Tell tales that matter. But when a voice you love calls you toward darkness and your palms itch to hit record, stop and think of bells swaying in a forest somewhere far from any road. Think of a woman driving alone at night, determined not to look back. Think of how stories cling and how silence can be an act of love. Not every question needs to be answered. Not every mystery wants to be solved. Some echoes should be allowed to fade.